country photo. Inside this country photo. Inside this country photo. Ministry of Tourism Day. National Tourist Body. Monument Relics Commission. AYD sent no. Salon country photo. Salon country photo. Inside this country photo. Inside this country photo. Inside this country photo. Tourism I say the day. Traditional business day. Tourism business day. Country food I say the day. Salon country photo. Salon country photo. Inside this country photo. Inside this country photo. STN culture day. Country food I say the day. Sorry side I say the day.
Hello and welcome to another edition of you program, me program, and we all program Salon Country Ports. Salon Country Ports are the program with the Ministry of Tourism and Cultural Affairs, the National Tourist Board, and Monument and Relics Commission join for bring you all them. Salon Country Ports look at we culture, we heritage, we history, but also with tourism business that this country has so Salon. Well, for long time now, Salon Country Ports don't bring you information that we need, but the cultural heritage that this country has. So in this particular edition, we can bring you waiting one person we they call archaeologist. In a foreign student actually, he then at the country for do research on the things them where we force them people them in left. Because archaeology na the study of ancient remains, when they study all things them, then they dig the ground for finding things that when people will be not they use first them. And another thing that they use now for interpret the life where them people they be not they live. For tell about them people their culture and how they live their life them. So today we can do something with Oluseyi Agbelusi. Oluseyi Agbelusi na a Nigerian student na the Syracuse University na United States of America. It only Salon for quite some time now. They do this research also. So he go share in knowledge and experience but what he discover with students them na the history and cultural studies department na Fourah College. Let me just enjoy as we listen to this very important and educative session we get with students them. Who say students ask plenty questions them and he provide answer to all the things in it. Let me enjoy this edition of Salon Country Ports. Mina Mohamed Farikago.
A postgraduate student at the Faculty of Art. Okay, you in your open statement, you made a statement that I would like you to clarify. You indicated that the liberated Africans refused to farm. But I may not like to submit to that. I think it was due to the nature of land. If you observe around Freetown, it was rugged and rough. So they had the potential, they were willing, but I think what hindered them was the nature of land and that of their lack of knowledge in tropical farming. Yeah, you can compare tropical farming and that of their own weather there. I think the tropical farming, they did not have idea on it more, so it hindered them. The nature of the land and their lack of knowledge in tropical farming was what hindered them, but they did not actually refuse, they were willing. Yeah. Okay.
First. Yes, so the idea behind the division is because one of the recent literature has begun to challenge archaeologists as well as historians to be very careful about how we talk about colonialism. So because most time when we talk about colonialism, we talk about domination and resistance. So there is one person who has power, and there is one poor person who has to resist those powers. So, but one of the things that recent literature has been telling us is that we also need to try to what is influencing this world. So it's not just about the British creating a colony, it's also about what power or what kind of freedom does the liberated African also have within their local household, within the community, right? So, and that is why I've classified that way. The other thing is also because, like I said, there was also certain things that they chose to do, that was their decision. It wasn't like what the British government wanted them to do. So, but which was different from the colonial period when you have local people being displaced and you have a colonial state. So, and that is why I've made that kind of classification about the colonial period. The other thing I also wanted to talk about is that when we see the colonial period in 1896, as you say, it was scramble for Africa. Native people didn't have power. So those local rulers were displaced of authority, including the protectorate. But during the nascent colonialism, we had head women. Even we had the Creole Thomas King who was ruling the group, the liberated Africans. So there was a sense of freedom within that colonialism. And that's why I feel like we shouldn't just call it colonialism, but something that is looking like colonialism, but not yet colonialism. So, and that's how I define it. So I hope that answers your question about the arbitrary. So to talk about the farm, yeah, yes, I agree with you that there was the idea that they were willing, but they didn't have the opportunity to do it yet. We have from colonial record that there was nobody to train them in the colony on how to farm because they have never worked in plantation sites before. They are different from the other West, like returnees from the Americas who had to work on slave ship. But yes, but there's also a sense of resistance there, like because it was their own decision to turn to trade instead. So that's where I talk about agency here. So it's not just about what the government wanted them to do, but also about what they had interest in doing. So and that is where that form of resistance comes, and our agriculture become a form of resistance, and our trade rather become a form of resistance to agriculture. So, but yet I agree with you that it wasn't just a food in the future; they also didn't have the knowledge to do this, like to plant and to work and land tenure system as well. The land belonged to the Tigray people beforehand, and they had to just use it. Thank you.
After the excavation process in Egypt, how best can you relate the archaeological findings in the caves or valleys with the stories connected to the item found? After the excavation process, the archaeological findings, the items that were found, how best can you relate it to the stories and you spoke about trade? So we want to know, because I saw pictures of bottles, red plastics, so what are the stories behind those items that were found?
So I think I've left that out of the presentation because we will have an exhibition. So I felt like that would be the best time to tell stories around those objects. So and that is why that is left out of the presentation. Yeah, but just to answer that quickly, so the story behind it is something not far from what I've said so far. It's about trade. They are all trade items. So and it's also about how the liberated Africans who live in this house, how they use those trade items. So and then maybe I can speak more about that when we look at each of those materials themselves. So I hope that answers your question.
Your collage was good and very, very unique. But actually, I want to know when your research will start and when it will end, right? And the differences between an archaeologist and whether an anthropologist. Yes, sir.
But now that means that everybody is an anthropologist, right? So we all study human beings in one way or the other. So and that's why anthropology is a very broad discipline. So I can call myself an anthropologist as well. So just to clarify that part. So but in anthropology then we have different branches. So one of them is now archaeology. So the archaeology is what I do, that I excavate and I bring these materials out. So the other part of it is what we call biological anthropology. So the biological anthropology, I know some of you have gone to Takugama, you see those chimpanzees. You see them there. So it's about the story of how the human being evolved from apes. How did it become a Those who do ethnography, who goes into communities, they study those communities, they do establish like you. So, and then the final one is linguistics, anthropology. So which has to do with people studying languages that are in danger, that is about to go into extinction. So in that way, so every one of them can identify as an anthropologist. But at the same time, I can also say because of what I do, I'm an archaeologist. So I hope that answers why I'm an archaeologist and I'm also an anthropologist. So that's why you saw in the beginning of the slide, I showed the Department of Anthropology, but I'm within the archaeology section. So the second part of the second question in nature, that's the first thing. And that's why I talk about trade, as you see, is about capitalism, you know, how we need to create plantation economy in the Americas. And we need people to work there, right? So these Native Americans are dying out with diseases in the Americas because of the kind of plague that has been brought into America by these Native Americans. So they need workforce. So where do we turn to? West Africa. Let's look for how we can bring Africans across. But this is my point here. Modern world. That's how historical archaeologists have described it. This is when you have globalization. So you have this sea, like transportation. So you now have every part of the world connected through trade. Maybe Portugal, Sweden, you know, all of them building ports in West Africa. So, and then that's when they believe that will be modern. So before then, it was ancient, which is complicated. But what I'm saying is that it's also a way of creating that kind of civilization, the story around civilization as well. So, and that's why you see that capitalism was crucial to this. And there's a book that I know you will have read here as history students about Walter Rodney that talks about how Europe underdeveloped Africa. So it was a way to create Europe as an empire. It's empire formation. So we want to create this empire, the British Empire, you know, all of them, and then we need people to be subjects, right? So who will be the subjects? Africans, they come to Africans, you know, and that's part of why you have enslavement. So, and many other things, we can talk about 19th century racism too, savagery, you know, and those are among other things that we can talk about. So it's a story of inequality, as I said. Why should Africans be enslaved, right? So the story of inequality is the story of how we see Europe as the apex of civilization. So, and that's complicated, and that's what this kind of work is challenging. To say that even if British government have a colony in Sierra Leone, these liberated Africans also had some sense of freedom. You know, they could make their own decisions, even though they are subjects. So that's just maybe a short way to explain, but maybe your professors here can, like Professor Agbelusi, can add more, or many other people. I don't want to put them on the spot, but I know there's a lot that we can talk about. But one thing, just keep it in mind, is about economic reasons to enslave Africans to create an economy in Americas, or economy for Europe. Yeah, thank you.
Touched upon colonialism in Sierra Leone in the 19th century. I was wondering what's your take on the colonial governors, especially those who were around when Regent was founded, Wilberforce was founded, Gloucester was founded, Hastings, and so on and so forth in the early part of the 19th century. So what is your understanding of those governors' responsibilities, especially Governor Charles McCarthy in the early part of the 19th century did a lot, especially for Regent. School, education, religion, town planning, government system, especially local government, which allowed villages, because that's how they were called in the 19th century, like Regent to prosper. But when Governor McCarthy was killed, there were hard times, especially after 1824. So I was just interested in your understanding of these colonial governors.
Charles McCarthy was very crucial to Regent in many ways, you know, and very famous, and even he has a church in our time. So yes, so I think there are many stories, most of them written by historians, that has to do with different kind of approach, you know, like Governor Thompson, who would be the first established regent, before Governor McCarthy would take over, and many other people who succeeded along the line. So I think they all have their interest. I think some are interested in agriculture, like I said, like Thompson, who more or less like adopt this Adam Smith's notion of political economy. And then we also have, Governor McCarthy that was more, we need to Christianize these Africans. They need to be Christians. They need to go to church. They need to live in orderly fashion. They need to go to school and be educated, right? And we also have some other ones that are interested in military war. They wanted to create a kind of empire, not just about Sierra Leone. Let's conquer the whole part of West Africa. Let's extend to the Gold Coast. So Marshall who saw some of these Ashanti people as soldiers who could fight wars and help them win places. So yes, so it's a kind of story, but I think Governor Charles McCarthy is really key to the story of these liberated Africans, the concept of this parish settlement, and more importantly, the idea of him also supervising the building of that church at St. Charles, having writing reports about what was going on with the army, who was I think the soldier of the army, who was I think that army with local people building the church, and the kind of the vision he had for that village to be a kind of like a Kingston in Africa, like a kind of England in Africa, where there will be a church at the center with bell and everything, and then there will be orderly streets. So whatever you see in that village today is still a reflection of his ideas as Governor McCarthy, that okay, we want a settlement that people will live in order. When you think of African settlement before this colonialism, people live in compounds, like compound, social groupings, brother and sister together, and they create very big community. But for Governor McCarthy, you live in house lots, one after the other, with neighbors, with clear streets and grids. So, and whatever you see as whether you turn to Virgin Street, or you go to Winchester, or you go to Parklands, these are ideas that he had for that village to create a kind of grid line. So yes, so it was really crucial. But I think his death in Ashanti War, I think also led to that freedom that the liberated Africans would have, because they were now able to govern themselves, because he had more he was monitoring at that time. He wanted to see how their life was going to turn out. But I think the death gave that kind of what Patterson described as the province of freedom. The freedom for them now to be able to order themselves, rule themselves, have headmen and headwomen. So that kind of is a transition from that kind of colonial government to local politics that continued maybe in the village today, like our headwoman who is here today.
The mountain rural peninsula is part of mixed sites. Mixed sites with regards tentative list, and there is a challenge. A mixed site talks about culture and nature, and this is just in line with such a unique idea from that standpoint as a state party. Although there are huge challenges on the wholeness and integrity going forward, but it is one drive that is very, very unique, and I believe the ministry will want to get the results of such to relate the culture and that of nature side. And taking it to another area, which is the historical, I would say, marginalization of the captives and liberated Africans led to the creation of the mountain rural villages. Maybe you talk more on that, how factual is such a statement, especially when these captives, marginalization of the captives or liberated Africans led to what? The creation of mountain rural villages, because we noted how Governor McCarthy and other governors came in to aid those who followed after the initial settlers, and the way they were treated thus led to third forms of having mountain rural villages, which now host the nature site of the Western Peninsula, mountain forest, and these villages, which is a unique area for nomination for sites to the UNESCO Heritage List. And the other area I want to ask is that, and it relates to our students here because they offer art history. It tells us that what we see in our environment depicts the civilization and is an expression of the civilization and the technology used. So from all of these items we come to see, maybe you lead us which era, which period was trade a dominant mode of operation that stimulated these items, or agriculture, like you were explaining? Maybe these would aid in bringing out these issues because they express the ways of life and social undertakings. And again, I see from these artifacts adaptive skills of the individuals. I met where you're talking about utilitarian items, everyday use, and I know students here virtually will be given assignments and tests after this, so they have a way of thinking, widely around your subject area, because it's really, really essential. And the last one, and I want to rest my case, is how deep was the excavation? And do you consider maybe going to other sites to go deeper, so you trace items that will take us to technology, civilization that were much more further than the 19th century? Thank you.
Establishment of the villages. So the third thing has to do with the students. Yes. So one of the things that we've seen, in the archival record as well as the archaeological records, is that we could see household craft activities. People could make things local themselves. So we've seen also how they utilize imported materials, things that are foreign today, in a way that is familiar. So we've seen them use soup bowls to heat, even though the bowls that they are using today, they didn't make it themselves. As you see on this particular line, we have local ceramics that were made locally. There are some that are imported, but they still adapted those local ones in a way that it's fit into their everyday life, right? So for the students, there are handwork that we can see on the sensors about different kind of activities that doesn't exist anymore in the village. So, but we also understand that some of those materials were not produced locally. Some of them were within the region, but not at the region. For example, there is no blacksmith in that village, so any metal object will have been brought into that village. So there are certain things that also show, but there are craft activities like sewing, laundry work, like I showed in the slide, that showed that people had certain skills beyond just going to school. So, and the other thing is about the depth. So the depth varies because we excavate this when we don't find any materials. So we don't have a particular meter or centimeter in mind. We keep digging until we don't find anything. So if you dig and you continue to find until 4 meters, you keep going. 5 meters you go. And I think that is one of the things that is kind of interesting about regions, because Christopher Fife talks about it in one of the books that we have here on display. This particular book written by Osman. So, and one of the things that Christopher Wright talks about is that maybe in chapter 2 of it, he said one day, maybe an archaeologist will tell us the history of regions beyond the liberated Africans. So, well, the good news is that, for now, is that I didn't see any record beyond the life of the liberated Africans at Fijian State. So maybe in future, archaeological research can tell us maybe somewhere else in regions that can show us life of those who lived in regions before it was established in 1812. So, but my research is not an answer to Christopher Five's, no kind of vision for the place, but the potential is there. We can't deny it. So, because we believe that the peninsula was occupied before the 19th century. And finally, further research. So it would be good to look at more household. It would be good to also look at maybe the King's Yard to understand anti-slavery in better terms beyond people's houses. So we can also look at even other places like market areas, like I know Mr. Nico has been talking about looking at up markets and other areas that are not residential, but the activity areas that can add to the story of the life of this liberated Africa. So far, we've talked about individuals. We also talk about community. What brings people together? Economic systems. Those things are also potential that we can look at.
What you've done for us in that community, because I just want to believe that you've put us on the limelight. But I want to ask a question with regards to Charles McCarthy's intention for that village. After all your research, what's your take about Regent Village now? After all the research you've done, what's your take about Regents now? Thank you.
So yeah, I talked about Governor McCarthy's vision for the village. Yes. So, and most of it has to do with the church, the streets, and also how there should be school where people can be educated. But of course, like I said, it's also about how people are able to reconfigure the use of space. You know, one of the things I see is that when you look at the church, I wish the slide is on, you will see the image of the church. There is a reason why the church is on the hill. There's a reason it's on the hill. Why it's not on, let's say, Fijian Street or Jeremiah Street? There's a reason why it's on that hill. It all has to do with surveillance. I don't know if my spelling is correct.
S-C-R-Y-A-N-I-V-E-I.
V-E-I, okay, yeah. Okay.
Double-L-E-S.
Yeah, thank you, ma'am. So it's surveillance. So it's the idea that Reverend Johnson and the likes will be able to manage the life of these liberated Africans. So they can see them from any angle. So that is where the office will be. So if they do something that is against how they are trained, it's a kind of what we call body politics. So you are trained to say, okay, this is how you should, this is how you should behave. So they teach them, this is how you should behave, this is how you should dress, with a card, with everything. It's a body politics that they are trying to transform, you know, to say, and then also the idea of how you live your life. So we know you live in groups. Now you have to be a kind of individual person. You must be able to own private property. So the idea about private property, so that it had bent for the villagers. But the thing is, we also see the way they navigated it. You see how people create communities. You see like the old soldier area. You know, you see the Jeremiah Street, how they were clustered. You now see groups, ethnic groups, coming together and living together. So they were trying to go back to their usual way of life. So we talk of the Mokotam, you know. So they start creating those communities back themselves. So the idea was that they should be individuals, they should own private property. But they don't want. There's a way of life that they're used to. So they want to create those communities within that village again. So which is what I said, I have to clarify what I complicated. Yeah, that yes, they had that freedom to be able to regroup themselves from this kind of lines that you see there, those streets, those four corner streets that you see all over the place. They were able to regroup and be able to organize themselves. So, and I think that is where you see the changes from what Governor McCarthy imagined compared to what you have there today. So I hope, yeah.
Thank you.
All right.
This brings us to the close of the lecture. On behalf of the Department of History and African Studies, I'd like to thank you all for coming. Thank you very much.
So this is how they were making their food. And if you look at this one shows that it was used for cooking. You can see the body. It was used for cooking. And then you can see the decoration that they had on it. So this is how they were making pots before they were making. They were brought in through trade, like I said. And that's why I think trade as a way of understanding the life. So another thing you have here is the lid is a cover of the pot, of the local pot, that they put there and they don't put it in. And why this one is an oil lamp. So it's an oil lamp that they put the oil here and then they put the lid and then they before they start using lantern and then they can make it. So these are all from the Johnson house. This is what is left now. So they are also, you can see the and the other thing is that there is one of them that is quite interesting because the food that was ate last was on it. So if you look at it, you see the food. It's difficult because of there's no light. But if you look at the food that was on it, you can pass it around. You can see that the food that was still, it wasn't washed before it was left. You can see the fragment of the food that was ate is still there. These are glass bottles, so I know some of you might know this one. These are the that they do so, and this can tell us a lot about their lives in terms of, I think someone was talking about what is this material does. So this can tell us about festivals, maybe ceremonies, other events like party, social life that these people engaged in. So the same applies for this also gym as well. And then we saw over 160 of these. We also saw that these people were really good drinkers. Like they drank a lot. And the interesting thing is, especially for the Johnson house, when we get to that side, we also know that they are very good smokers as well. They smoke a lot from tobacco. So it looks like there were people that kind of enjoyed social life. They were all free, and then they had access to these particular materials. So they could buy them, they could afford them. So, and this is just samples from it.
Well, you don't see, you don't enjoy, and you don't get sober education, but waiting, Oluseyi Agbelusi don't find out that this is research wey they do na the Regent Village. Of course, it tell you about how we people them, when they return later on, where after they don't go through slavery, waiting na the life where they live na one of the village them na the mountain area. Well, that's so Salon Country Boss go left you for today. So take some other time where we will bring you another Salon Country Reports. Me na Mohammed Farikabo. Always follow me for your information on tourism, history, heritage, and other national developments. Now, the Ministry of Tourism and Cultural Affairs, National Tourist Board, and Monuments and Relics Commission produce this program for SECA Tourism Development na Salon. Thank you, and join me some other time.